He might not have the time to tell the story, but we all do know his story. That probably if he wasn't an eminent person in this republic, maybe his son would not have recovered from that trauma, like many other young Kenyans we lost. He was also the Minister for Public Service, immediate outgoing minister. We also have the Honorable Linturi, the outgoing Minister for Agriculture, who is here with us. We also have, and I will be requesting Martha Karua to come and say a word, many senators and governors and members of parliament who are here with us. And we want to hear this great story of a young man who came from a village in Sekuru and who walked to the pinnacle of diplomacy and made history that we have just witnessed tonight at a time when our country actually is facing a diplomatic disaster. Looking at his history and what he did in Sudan, in South Sudan, and DRC and other parts of the world, we will be hearing his story tonight at a time when we have a leadership that has become like a bull in the china shop. We do hope that this team one day will be privileged enough to put Humpty Dumpty back on the wall. May I invite the Honorable Martha Karua to say a word on behalf of our team, and to invite the Honorable Mohisa Kitui, who is a renowned diplomat, who was the Minister for Trade in the Kibaki government, and who also became the UN UNCTAD Secretary General, and he served for 2 terms. As Kenya, we missed the chance to lead the AU in the recent elections, but we do have amongst us tonight one Kenyan who succeeded in leading the UN in matters international trade and others. We would be requesting him to say a word and invite his fellow diplomat, His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka.
As acquaintances or friends of His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, I have worked with him for a long time. Maybe he may or may not remember, but I've reminded him once or twice when I was a young magistrate before the age of 30, and he was a young lawyer. He did appear before me. You don't always remember people who appear before you, but I liked the way, I noticed the way he handled the case and his clients, and he led them, because it was a case that people could reconcile, he led them to reconciliation. Maybe that's a trait in diplomacy. And later on in life, I met him as a member of parliament. I found him in parliament in 1993. For the young ones, that may sound like a long time, and it is. We've been around. So, and we've worked with him since. He's an easy person to work with, amiable, respectful, a diplomat to the core. And even though we were on opposing sides those days, he was a minister in the KANU government, I was a member of the opposition, and we still were able to relate. I do recall when we started the formal journey to the constitutional review process. It is His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka who was able to lead the KANU team to negotiate with us and to address us in a manner that we could actually sit down and negotiate. You may not remember that, but that was the Bomas and Safari Park process. We have later worked closely on the same side. In 2002, when we came into government, where he became the Minister for Home Affairs at one stage, and I was Minister for Water at that time. We have worked well, and I know he's a people person and a great team member, team player. We've also worked together in opposition when we were both out of government for the last 12 years. We have worked together, and more lately, in the 2022 presidential elections, we worked very closely, and after whatever transpired, we have continued to work together, and now we are together forming a broad coalition to transform the country. I would just want to conclude by saying that Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka is not just a diplomat because he has worked as one. He's a born diplomat, a great person to work with, and a person who is open and transparent in his work. And with those very many remarks, I want to call my friend, age mate, Dr. Muhisa Kitui, former Secretary General of UNCTAD, and a person who was a colleague minister. We were in college together, then in parliament together, then in government together, and now working together in the opposition. Yeah.
Asante sana. Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, friends of Kenya, Your Excellencies and honorable leaders of political parties, other friends of Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, ladies and gentlemen. Nice things have already been said about our host today. I'm not going to repeat those. I just want to say one or two little things that don't so much mark what he did, but why we miss such talent in public leadership in the country today. The first 10 years of my acquaintance with Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, he was a Minister of Government and I was an opposition parliamentarian. The highest point of our altercations was during the crisis of the genocide in Rwanda, when I brought to Parliament a motion of adjournment to discuss the failure of African diplomacy and the failure of the world to stop the butcher of innocent civilians in that then sad place. Since then, we even got very, very closely together, because after the 2002 elections, I became Minister of Trade and Industry and was Foreign Minister. We were both members of Council of the East African Community. So for a very, very intense 3-4 years, we were intimately involved in negotiation of a common market, the customs union and common market for East Africa. I remember we were spending sleepless nights with Jakaya Kikwete and the Deputy Prime Minister of Uganda to beat the deadline, because there was that drive and desire for East African integration. But beyond that, he's known as Mr. Peace Builder for his work not just in Sudan, but also the Mbagathi process for peace building in Somalia. We mention these things not so much as a celebration of an icon of diplomacy, but as a sharp contrast to the sad situation in which we find ourselves today. Unfortunately, egos and guns have been bigger in supply than brains in South Sudan, and you see how the promise of the youngest African country has turned into disaster. We host the richest thieves from South Sudan and the poorest victims of that thievery in our country. Similarly, as Sudan unravels, as Khartoum becomes a no-go area, it pains those of us who have associated with peace building to know that we have a president who, sheerly for personal interest in bloody gold, is dragging Kenya into a crisis that's not our own. And he brings people to this territory to try to form a so-called shadow government, when those people have gained their reputation for slaughtering black people in Darfur and Zagawa. It's a disgrace that could never happen if Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka had his way, had a say in how Kenya runs its diplomacy. Similarly, we are passing through difficult times. Today, as I was coming here, I heard the announcement of the Franco-German defense agreement. The first time that Europe has had to look at building a new architecture for defense because of rumbles across the Atlantic. It's a difficult times. But for us, we believe that friends of Kenya will still have the attention to support our democratic project. They could still stand with the efforts of people like Kalonzo Musyoka. Traditionally, the struggle for Kenya's democracy has been watered by the principled statement of the diplomatic community that we stand for what is good for the country, without fear of intimidation, without being blackmailed, without pretending to hail a king as having the best clothes when you can see that the king is naked. Sorry, it's not my day. I just want to say we contrast what we have heard and what is existing in the Kenyan gene pool and the inadequate capacity, competence, and execution of diplomatic duty that we witness in our country today. I am proud to be associated with Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, and thank you very much for making us share this important day in your life.
And it's not so easy speaking in a crowd like this that has diplomats. I do not know exactly which language to speak because I'm told diplomats speak many languages, including double speak. But I'll try. It's a great honor to have been associated with Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka and to realize that he is actually celebrating 40 years in politics. And I don't know whether you understand what that means. There is a common joke that used to run, and it was in the form of a question. What does a politician and a diaper have in common? And the answer is that both of them should be changed regularly, and for the same reason, and the reason that it gets soiled. So to have survived 40 years without the need to be changed tells you that he has outlived many diapers and he hasn't soiled himself in politics. I think that alone is what makes us celebrate Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka today. And combined, of course, with his politics, with his diplomacy, which, as you all have been told, especially by Mheshimiwa Martha Karua, that his diplomacy is not career diplomacy. It's a living diplomacy. He is a living diplomat. In fact, a few decades ago, the late Mwai Kibaki was popularly referred to as the gentleman of Kenya's politics. And I would dare say, without doubt or equivocation, that the heir to that title as a gentleman of Kenya's politics is Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. Of course, with a rider. You know, the word gentleman, for those of you who think gentleman means you can be pushed around, I would like to add a rider that even a gentleman is only 50% gentle, the rest is man. So be careful. You should not try and push him. Don't try and push him too hard. But 40 years, to me, is 40 years of Kenya's political history, and you know where we stand today. So without saying too much, I just want to say, Mheshimiwa Kalonzo, congratulations. But your biggest diplomatic duty lies ahead. In my view, the building of a people's coalition is going to require the summoning of all the diplomatic skills that you have acquired in your life. So you are going to be crucial, and your diplomatic skills are going to be needed in the building of that people's coalition.